successive quarters, i.e. from quarter 1, 2020, quarter 2, 2020 to now, you're now finally seeing where the company is showing a net profit relative to a loss in the first 2 quarters, which is saying that they have cauterized their expenses and the company is now generating cash based on their dividend income, etc. As earlier pointed out, the comprehensive income is still negative, and that speaks to a slowing of the decline in the market or certainly the portfolio. And we expect going forward that we should start to see the comprehensive income trend close to zero, if not a small profit. So again, what you see here is that when you compare to last year, September, when the market was almost at its peak, the shareholders' equity of the business was over $17 billion. So notwithstanding the fall off in the first quarter primarily, the business still has $10 billion in equity. And we're now at a point where we think the stock market is slowing, and ultimately for 2021, we'll probably see it start to make a gradual increase. And certain particular stocks will probably outperform the market. So this gives a synopsis of where the portfolio is. And what you'll see is that during the quarter, the value of Supreme Ventures continues to be the largest holding. And that contributed to the reduction in comprehensive income because you saw a 6% reduction in the price. Since September 30, the price has moved up some more. So I think that augurs well for the fourth quarter. The big mover in the portfolio was Derrimont Trading. You see there it's appreciated by 30% for the quarter, which I think augurs well. For the rest of the portfolio, the performance has been relatively flat or slightly down. And we think a lot of those businesses have kind of reached the bottom. And certainly going into the first quarter of 2021, we would start to see a turnaround in that. Most importantly is that as of September 30, MJE had cash in excess of $500 million, which means that the business is in a good position to take up new stocks at relatively low valuations, which I think will help the portfolio going forward. Now, this chart basically gives you the buy signals. So the orange line speaks to where the stock is trading, and the blue line speaks to the net book value of the business. So anytime you see the orange line below the blue line, it's an opportunity to buy, because what this is saying is that if you were to liquidate the total portfolio, the value you would get is the book value. So obviously, if you buy below the book value, you have an inherent profit at that point in time. So again, these are our core values. I've kind of gone through quickly where we are. And as you said, as at the end of September 30, the price was $7.90. And you have seen where it has taken its time and started to trend up to approximately $8.30, which is still below its book value. So we think it's a good time to buy, because ultimately, as we always say at Mayberry, MJE, the only Jamaican stock you need to own. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Gary. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you during the program with some questions and answers on MJE. I certainly have one in my mind. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce to you our special guest for this week. He's the CEO of Jamaica Teas Limited, formerly Tetley Tea Company Limited, which was founded back in 1967. The company initially produced black teas under the Tetley Tea brand, as well as providing contract manufacturing arrangements. Since being acquired by the father and son team of Adid and John Mafood in 1995, the company's product range expanded to include over 40 different types of teas. And they launched their Caribbean Dreams brand, which I personally like, John. The Caribbean Dreams brand offers consumers a unique herbal combination with infusions. What some of you may not know is that Jamaica Teas Limited is actually comprised of 4 divisions. They've got manufacturing, real estate, retail, and investments. They currently hold a 24% stake in share in QWI Investments Limited, a company listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, which had its IPO back in 2019. Speaking of the stock exchange, if you're looking to expand your portfolio or invest in the stock market, we encourage you to give us a shout at Mayberry Investments Limited, where we can help you choose a portfolio, which might include QWI or Jamaica Teas. Call the number on your screen or visit our website to learn how you can become a shareholder in the JSC. So, John is the CEO of Jamaica Teas. He's our very special guest today. He's currently a CPA. He's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountant. He's experienced in local and international retail and trade, as well as in mergers, expansions, and turnarounds. He's a philanthropist and an avid social commentator. He's the recipient of several awards, including being recognized by the Jamaica Observer Business Leader nominee in 2014. As I mentioned before, he's a CPA and a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica. Today, he'll be giving you an investor briefing on Jamaica Teas Limited. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. And I'll jump right into our first question. I understand you guys are looking to upgrade your factory, and I was curious to appreciate, in terms of increased production, are there any other benefits that we can expect?
Well, we have been growing, since we bought the company, we have been growing steadily and constantly outgrowing the facilities that we are in, that we have been in, and we are in the present facilities we started in here in 2014, and now we're bursting at the seams and trying to expand the manufacturing side. So we're basically doubling the warehousing and manufacturing facility to allow us to catch up with the demand from our customers and to get into other new areas of operation.
Excellent. Happy to hear that. Additionally, based on the company's year-end results, I saw where the cost of sales increased quite a bit. Could you explain what was driving this increase?
Well, as you would note from the accounts, the sales increased significantly over the prior year. Some of it, a big part of it, had to do with the manufacturing division, but we also had sales of real estate of $240 million and the supermarket sales. And those sales increases, obviously the cost of sales had a related increase, but not as much as the increase in sales. And so our margins overall improved. Our margin rate improved in the year, which is very good, which is what you hope for.
Absolutely. I saw the fourth quarter results. They're quite impressive. It looks like you grew your gross profit from roughly $330 million to $600 million.
Yes.
Sales went from $1 billion to something like $2 billion. That's pretty good. It's sort of showing that you guys haven't been negatively impacted by COVID for the most part.
Well, like most companies, when COVID came to Jamaica in February, and the government, most of us didn't know what to expect. It was a big unknown, and the government was taking action to reduce the chance of contracting this, and they started to lock down the country, and everybody was scared, and so back then, we were envisaging the possibility of the factory having to close down. But by April or so, and as more knowledge about COVID started to we started to receive more information, things settled down. And what really then happened from there, April going on to May and June, was that there was a large population all over the world of people either working from home or being laid off their workplace. A lot more people are at home, cooking for themselves because restaurants are closed, and not being able to go out. So I think what has happened all over the world, not just Jamaica, is that people consumed more at home, more meals at home, and started to buy for themselves when in the past, when you went to work, you got lunch or you went to a restaurant. So people started to consume our products more in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, in the US, and we started to see a significant increase taking place month after month, progressively. And so it has benefited us a great deal because our products are relatively inexperienced, they're basic, even though our food items are relatively basic, their ingredients and so on. And we have benefited, and you know, it's with mixed emotions because you know that a lot of Jamaica and the world has suffered very badly. But for our company, it has been very positive.
It's been a great year. I don't think you need to apologize for doing well. I know I was at home for 2 months and I was certainly drinking a lot more tea. Tell me, what are some of the opportunities that the company has chosen to capitalize on during this environment?
That has failed to capitalize on?
What has chosen to capitalize on?
Well, we have basically, you know, in January we had our international conference. We brought all our customers to Jamaica. We implemented plans, advertising plans, and so on. And that laid the groundwork for a better year. But then we got overtaken by COVID. And to some extent, we have been playing catch up with our customers, increasing their orders and trying to meet that extra demand through working extra time, adding new products, and trying to be more efficient, those types of things, so that our rate of production has gone up 35–40%. And we have been just busy trying to keep up with the increased demand.
Excellent. Sounds like a good problem to have. I'd like to apologize for our chairman not being with us today, Chairman Berry, and which leaves me only with Gary. Gary, over to you. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Sure. Hopefully I can carry the burden. So one of my first questions to John is that I find a level of innovation in your products and how you run the business. Who is the main driver behind that? And the corollary to that is, where's the succession? Because to the average person, you might look like an understated individual, but you drive a lot of what is there in the business. Who God forbid something happens to you, who follows through?
Good question, Gary.
Thank you.
Well, you know, as a brokerage company to the Junior Stock Exchange, that most of us who started in the Junior Stock Exchange were small family businesses, were run tightly, and had minimal overheads. And that was one of our successes. But then as you grow, and you would know this too, from being associated with a lot of junior stock exchange companies, you try not to get too carried away in adding new talent, although you need it, in adding new staff, in adding overheads, because you want to retain that efficiency and hunger that you had. But we have now been on the stock exchange for 10 years. I am getting ready to sort of hand over to some younger folks, and we are looking at our team to add it, to increase it, to add in judicial areas the right people, so that we can, even with the increase in the size of the plant, we can add people who are going to take it to another level. Because while I have been successful in bringing it to a point, I believe there is more to go. And there is, even within our existing customer base in the Caribbean and elsewhere, we can penetrate those markets much more. When I compare our business here in Jamaica, where it is our domestic business, our home, we can use that as an example to say that in Trinidad, we should be looking ultimately at doing a level of business that is, if not similar to Jamaica, not far off. But what we have is a situation where most of our markets, when you take all the markets together, it's significant. But individually, they're not significant. So we have to find a way of expanding, not expanding the product range, but doing a better job of expanding our market share in the smaller markets. And that is the key, I believe, to our success going forward, to capitalize in the U.S. where we have the products in the Walmarts and the Publix. We need more of those. We need more products in there. So that's our aim. I have been the driver in terms of new product innovation, but we have a fair amount of products. What we need now is to get more sales from those existing products.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Tell me, what are some of the
So
measures?
can I have a follow-on?
Of course, Gary. Please.
Yeah. So, you know, when I look on the business, John, I mean, as you know, we work together in the listing, Mayberry and Jamaican Teas. But when I look on the business, especially the divisions, seem to be a breakout of your personal, for want of a better word, talents across different businesses. Yes. So the manufacturing, the investment, the supermarkets, etc. And as I said, you're a unique individual in that you had talents across those different divisions. So it's really a follow-up to the succession argument in the sense that are you looking to groom or coach somebody who could be like you, who's able to cut across those four divisions: development, investing, manufacturing, sales, etc.? Or are you looking at trying to find individuals who be able to be expert in each of the different divisions?
It's the latter. You know, our core business is really manufacturing. And so
Yes.
I want that business to be as strong as it can be. And we will, you know, find a leader for that business that will take it to another level beyond what I have done with it, and strengthen the team below the CEO so that we can build the manufacturing side of the business. As I step back, I will look at the other areas, the real estate, and do some work in the QWI. But I'm not looking at being a conglomerate. I'm looking at more the focus being on the manufacturing, and hopefully we have enough expertise, not with me, but with other people in QWI that can, you know, develop on its own.
Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Gary. Tell me, John, what are some of the measures implemented within the company to reduce the risk and exposure to the pandemic?
Well, I don't think we are unique. There's been, I think the Ministry of Education, of Health did a tremendous job in Jamaica in the beginning in terms of communicating the needs of what we needed to do. Organizations like the JMEA and others also helped their membership in developing a list of action items that we needed, that all companies needed to take. And we went quickly at that because, you know, if one member of staff or two members of staff came down with COVID, it meant the whole operation had to close. And so we took all the necessary measures that everybody would have taken, and I don't think that it would serve to expand on those, except to say that, you know, we said to our staff, if you have the slightest thought that you're not feeling well, come and talk to us, and we will send you to the doctor. You won't lose anything. If you have to take 14 days off for COVID, you'll be paid. It doesn't come out of your sick leave and so on. So that we found that people were very honest with us because they didn't have anything to lose.
Excellent.
And you know what we found too was that two of our staff who got COVID, there was no symptoms other than the fact that they lost their sense of smell. And you know, they were fine, they were happy, they weren't feeling sick. But they recognized that as a problem and came to us. So we have had some folks come down with COVID, but more than that, we have had many that have just stayed home from abundance of caution, and we have been able to operate. We did things like provided transport for all our staff so they didn't have to go in public transport, and things like that and in the early days when staff were hoarding food and things like that, we gave them help and so on. But we're far beyond that now, and pretty level in terms of everybody knows what to do.
Excellent. So tell me, how has the export and domestic sales performed during the onset of the pandemic?
Well, as I said, we first saw in April, like most companies, locally, there was this run on the food supermarkets. This happened all over the world. We had our supermarket, we saw this run on it. And then we followed with the export customers also experiencing that. So the sales we started receiving orders in April, and those orders just kept on coming and increasing and increasing. And we are now at this phase where we're actually not able to keep up with the orders, and that's a very serious problem, you know. So we now have to find a way of lifting our production to another level and hoping that it's maintained for the long term.
Excellent. That's actually a good problem to have, don't you think, Gary?
That's the same thought that came to mind. That's an excellent problem to have, John. My question to you is that, you know, if you could, what are the three things you believe the government could do that would help Jamaica Teas and companies like Jamaica Teas to increase the pace of whether the expansion, the profit generation, or employment?
Again, well, let me back up a bit, Gary, and say to you, as you said, we were formed in 1967. In the 60s, the Jamaican government at the time, I think it was the JLP, came up with this plan to encourage local manufacturing by substituting imports with local manufacturing. And a ton of companies started operations in the 60s. Tetley was one of those. And then in the late 80s, without notice, the then government removed the protection for local manufacturers without notice. And very few of them survived. You know, from the 60s, those companies that were there then as manufacturers or started in the 60s are most of them not here today or not even owned by Jamaicans. And I use that information, you know, in starting our company to say that if we are to survive, we have to be able to compete on the international market because it is going to drive us to be very efficient. And if we are efficient in competing overseas, then we will be guaranteed a much larger market than in Jamaica. And I wish that Jamaican manufacturers would see that evidence that they are not in it for the short haul, but they're in it for the long haul. The government itself must find a way, in a strategic way, of trying to encourage local manufacturers through, if not direct effort, making the business easier. And we have made a lot of progress. I mean, when you think about it, 10 or 15 years ago to now, electricity is cheaper, there's more solar energy, and interest rates are down, foreign exchange is stable, inflation is down. Those are good things, but there's still a lot more that government needs to do. The bureaucracy of trying to do business and pay taxes and still having to go to a tax office in person to pay by check or by cash. There's a host of things the government has to do to reduce the bureaucracy, make it easier. We also, I believe, long-term, have to reduce the GCT rate. Obviously not now, but over a period of time, we have to get it back down to like a 10%. So there must be a plan of action to do that. And of course, encourage solar energy. So they must keep on pushing hard. Petrojam, for argument's sake, the study that was done indicated by Zaka that Petrojam needs to be shut down. Why keep this organization in place costing us more in terms of the price of gasoline? So I think the government needs to continue the movement that they started when they were in their first term and act aggressively to make doing business in Jamaica a lot easier. And if all they did was got into the top 5 in the doing business survey around the world, it would be a much easier place for companies to operate and for manufacturers to export.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that, John. I appreciate that.
Well, and again, I just want to follow through on and be a bit more specific. So one of the things that draws Mayberry to Jamaica Tea stock is that you generate a lot of cash, and so over time you have used use a lot of that cash in different ways. So that's why you have invested in arm, in real estate, etc. But the good problem that you speak about now is that you're basically at capacity. And so when you're at capacity, obviously the question is, how can you expand that manufacturing? But to the specific point I want to make to you, would you consider using some of that cash and putting in and take your entire business off the grid and put in solar? Because whilst I agree with you, John, and again, I think that's one of the things that brings people to the Jamaica Tea stock. You're trying to make sure that you're world class, given the limitations in Jamaica. So I have a view that any manufacturing company that can make money with the prices that JPS charges, if you're able to get those prices down, and in this point I'm making, if you invest in solar, it would significantly reduce your cost of production. So is that something you and your board would consider, given that over time you're throwing off sufficient cash to be able to make that work?
Well, we have installed significant solar system. We are probably using about 80%, 75% on solar and not on JPS. So it's a big, we are reaping a big benefit. To go to the 100% level now takes further investment in battery backups and so on. But we are not a cold storage company. We are not a huge user of electricity. So we are at a point now where the monthly electricity bill is relatively small for the manufacturing side of the business. And I would again encourage companies to go that route because the payback is relatively fast, 4 or 5 years for the installation of solar panels.
Good deal. We see your questions coming on social media. Thank you for that. I now have about 5, so let me run through the first one. Gary, the first one's going to be for you, and they're asking, would MGE buy back their shares when the share price is below the NAV? That's the first question in from social media.
So the simple answer to that is yes. In the prospectus, when the company was listed, we actually gave a basis on which we would consider it. So once the price falls to a particular level, we would give serious thought to buying back some of the shares. I think where it is now, I don't think it's at that trigger point. But obviously, I mean, if it continues to move away from the net book value, it would create significant benefits and value to buy it back than to buy another stock that's on the market.
Yep, I agree with that. And they certainly have the capacity to do it, folks. Again, MJE, I think I said it last week, $12 billion in assets, $10 billion in retained earnings. So not a company to be played with. Question for you, John. How did JAMT get started in the real estate business?
Well, let's see. We had to build a couple small facilities in the early days for ourselves, for rentals and so on. And a friend of mine came to us, I think in 2012 or 13, with a ready-made project in terms of offering us the land and the designs for the development, and we took it. It seemed interesting. We didn't have to devote a lot of attention to the management of the project, and we got into it, and it worked out. Not fantastically, but it worked out, and I got a kind of an itch for real estate in the sense that it's fun to see something start from nothing and develop, and at the end of the day you have this structure that houses a number of people, and it's just fun. But the way we do it, it's not a huge business for us. We take one project a year. We don't. We aim for the middle of the market. They're not too expensive. We don't want to go over 20, 21, 22 million. So our target audience in terms of potential purchasers are numerous. We don't go to the high end, and we have learned not to go to the low end. And we have a team of people who manage these projects. So the risks, and for instance, in the case of the Manor Park development, we were able to fund that through cash flow. We didn't have to go to the banks because banks make it very tedious to do real estate developments. And so it's something we do once a year, as I say, and provide some increased earnings for the group.
Yeah, but I was going to say it if you didn't say it. They do it because they have a lot of cash. Again, September year to date, even if the profit looks like $300 million, look in the cash flow and you'll see $1 billion generated from cash flow operations. Next question for you, John. After the 18 units you've done up at Violet's Manor, what's JAMT's next plan regarding real estate?
We started another project in Red Hills. This one is 25 units, again, studios and one bedrooms, priced between 14, 15, and 19, 20 million. And it'll be finished around the end of next year.
Excellent. Sounds exciting. Haven't forgotten you guys out at social media. Next question. It's for JAMT. Will JAMT consider doing iced tea beverages? It's
something that we would like to do, and we're working on formulations right now, ready to drink. I think it's something that we will probably do next year, we hope.
Okay, excellent. Similar one too is, or will you also consider doing some cool green tea beverage as well?
Well, it's similar to the ready to drink, so we're going to look into those things.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Good. Keep them coming, folks. Appreciate it. One more in. Are there any plans to graduate to the main market anytime soon?
We're considering that now. And it's probably just a matter of time. Probably next year we'll go to the main market.
Okay.
Because there's not, once you've exhausted your tax benefits, there's not much other benefits of being on the junior market.
Good point. Hey, Gary, any thoughts from you?
I agree with that point from John. The only question I have is that as you get to the end of the 10 years, you're now going to start to pay 100% of the tax rate. What are the strategic plans you have to compensate for that reduction in net earnings?
When we look at our forecast for next year, reflecting this 25% tax rate, we are still going to have, I believe, a good increase over 2020 because of the increase in the overall profit. And so while it's not, it's not so nice paying 25% tax when you've been accustomed to not paying any or half of that, it's painful but necessary, and we enjoy the benefit for 10 years. So
you've graduated, you've grown up, you get to pay taxes now.
Right.
Another question is, so you guys are expanding your factory to the tune of $200 million. What's the main focus of that expansion effort?
Well, we have, besides teas, we also got into the manufacturing of soups and packaged seasoning. So we have a contract with an overseas company to do a package seasoning for them, which when we put all the machinery in place will be about $1 million US business, and our soups are growing at a rapid rate. So we now have to dedicate a lot more space to this area, as well as the increased production of teas.
Excellent, excellent. And tell me, what percentage of your revenues is now coming from export, and how do you feel about exports going into the future?
Well, in the manufacturing side, it's between 60 and 65% are exported, and I would, I would like it to stay there at that level, which would mean that even though exports is growing, we're also getting increased sales locally. But what has happened for us for the past 5 years is that the rate of increase of domestic has been single digits to low double digits, while exports have been growing at 20% a year. So we're having that imbalance, so to speak, which is a good thing in a way, but we have to get more from the domestic market. I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So we're trying to think, you asked the question, are we going to graduate to the main market? But one of the things we are toying with or trying to ask ourselves, should we list the manufacturing company separately?
Yes.
As opposed to this kind of messy mini conglomerate, but keep the Jamaican teas side of it, or but spin off the manufacturing as a subsidiary or otherwise, so you can buy just the manufacturing side of the business.
So, as I said to you, Dan, John always have a way to show his innovativeness, right? So he now is the first guest that has actually asked us a question.
I like it.
But on a serious note, John, the thing is that each subsidiary should stand on its own. And in a way, if you start to look on the business as ultimately listing each of them, you can generate capital for each of those subsidiaries. And then the group company uses the cash to then look at new opportunities or different innovations to run a business, because ultimately at the end of the day, you have control at 50+1. So I think that makes sense. Obviously, you need to have a value proposition, which I'm sure you will be able to find. So that's my view on it. Yes, yes, and yes.
So you think that it would be well received then?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we have actually tasted that pudding. Because remember what I started, I said one of the things that attracted Mayberry to Jamaica Teas is your ability to generate cash. So you have a manufacturing base, and then when you start to expand the revenue side, and like what you're seeing now through exports, so you benefit two ways in exports, in that you have significant sales, but you also have sales in US dollars in a country where the currency is devalued.
Yeah.
So you have 2 or 3 different levels of profit, including for currency fluctuation. So effectively, when we listed Jamaica Teas, that manufacturing arm that you're speaking of now is really what Jamaica Teas was then. Because since listing, you then went more into the supermarket, more into the real estate development. QWI was something on some other cash, etc. So in a weird way, it technically would be a second listing for Jamaica Teas.
I like how Gary is giving away that free advice. I, of course, would naturally charge for it, but I think you're headed in the right direction, and you need to make sure you have a good advisor, a broker, who can structure the deal appropriately for you. But it's a great idea.
Yeah, well, John knows where value is, so if John wants this one, he wants to go cheaper, he'll get what he pays for. But he knows that. But I have a question. I have an interesting question for John. So since COVID, the companies who have done well are the companies that basically are manufacturing food items, etc. And we've seen a lot of, for want of a better word, super profits from these companies. The Grace Kennedys of this world, the Jamaica Teas to a certain degree, if you take out QWI, Derrimon, etc. My question is, at the point in which COVID starts to recede, whether it's the vaccine being had by all, but ultimately this whole COVID fear is going to change. We're going to open back up at some point. Do you expect a material fallout in some of the sales that you're seeing? And this is specifically to jam teas, but the broader question is across the economy or across the industry, do you expect to see a fall off once things come back to normal?
My sense, obviously that's a big worry for us. You go and you gear up and you build your manufacturing capability, and you're worried that in a year's time, sales reverse back to the pre-COVID. But the reason I don't think it's going to happen is a couple things. One is that we know that the whole world is changing in that, for instance, that the ride-sharing company, Uber, they're now, a bigger part of their business is now home delivery than it is people delivery.
Yeah, but Uber Eats,
the reason I'm saying that, though, is that the people are staying home more, and as you would also know, in the U.S., that is impacting on real estate because people are they see the ability to work from home, not just because they're forced to, but there are advantages of not driving to work and so on. So the world is changing in how people are going to operate in the future. Also, I think that because we hear that the vaccine is going to come sometime next year, but for it to cover all our marketplace, it's going to take, again, maybe till the end of next year. And there will be some gradual, as it happens, there'll be some gradual change back into the way business is done. Restaurants are reopened, bars are reopened. In the meantime, we hope that as people have been more exposed to our products and being able to buy them more easily because they're buying them online, they're buying them online and they're getting used to them, they may say, I'm going to continue to use these products. So we know that more people are buying our products, and we hope that that taste of the product is going to stay with them when they go back to work eventually. And because of the change in the way they operate, there will be a retention of a lot of that growth. That is our hope.
Thanks, and I hope you're correct.
Yeah, but I'm not making this up. I take my raspberry tea to work with me. Sandra tells me once a month when I need to buy my new pack of Caribbean Dreams tea.
One other question, though.
Sure, go ahead.
I was thinking, especially now in our investing market with interest rates down at the level that they are, and people have money, where are they putting it? They're certainly not putting it in the stock market. They're putting it a bit in real estate, and we see real estate continuing. They can't get much overseas unless they're just going to gamble on the exchange rate. But how do we get more money into the investable money? And one of the things I was asking myself is very few Jamaicans and Jamaican companies have pension funds. A very small percentage of Jamaican employees are covered by pension funds. If the government was to mandate that companies over 100 or 150 members of staff had to have a pension fund, and those funds would start to, those savings would start to be invested into the financial institutions, and they themselves would have more money to invest, would that stimulate the economy of Jamaica and manufacturing and other things?
I think from my point of view, Gary, you can weigh in. I think it's all about timing, right? So we definitely see where the government's moving to encourage more participation in the pension funds. We've seen it with the government workers themselves who previously didn't contribute towards pensions, and now they're transitioning to make that contribution themselves, so that's huge. But yeah, I totally agree that we need to look at the larger companies and have that requirement. We need to promote more IRAs. This definitely needs to be encouraged, not just because it's going to drive investment in the short term, but because so few people plan for their retirement, and that becomes a problem on the back end. So we definitely need to think about both pension funds and Medicare in terms of trying to encourage that type of direction. So appreciate the question. 2 questions from John, 2 pretty good ones. Gary, did you want to expand on that before we go into the top picks?
Well, to follow through on John's point, the quick answer is yes. Anything that increases the amount of investable funds would stimulate the economy. The problem I see, and I hate saying it this way, is that we're back into the bureaucracy you spoke about, John, in terms of how quickly it's going to take or how long it's going to take to set up those pension funds. And I think the biggest problem is likely to be for those companies that don't have the pension funds now, those workers see that as part of their take-home pay. So when you have to now change that culture to appreciate that up to 10 or 15% of your salary is now going to go towards, for a better word, delayed gratification, that's a process that you'd have to work through. But those things can be overcome. I think the issue is right now, there is significant amounts of investable funds that's available. And I think the challenge is that probably the government needs an innovative thinker like yourself, John, that can show them the direction that they need to be pushing people into. Because, one of the things I love talking about with you is that you spend enough time with you find 10 or 15 different opportunities. And I think that's where, in my view, the government needs to move towards, where you get a bunch of entrepreneurs, open minds and looking at the economy and saying, hey, if we put 10, 20, 30, 40 billion dollars into this industry, this is where we'll get some very good returns. But that's a conversation that needs to be had. But I think at this point, the government is probably so caught up in trying to fill a fiscal hole, but at the end of the day, yes, any increase in investable funds is a good thing.
And to commend Minister of Tourism Bartlett, he was making this push for pension fund for the tourism workers, and that was going to be about 200,000 people who would, for the first time, start to get into the habit of contributing into a pension plan. So I think to some extent the government's thinking about that already. Last question from me, John, from today, and that's coming from social media, is have you guys thought about exporting to perhaps markets such as Europe and Africa?
We have. It's tough business. We have basically gotten the English-speaking Caribbean. We're on the east coast of the U.S. There are some other areas that we believe, like Panama or Costa Rica, within the region that we can still make some inroads. The European market is big, and I think that we are going to have to make the investment. And some places like Ghana and so on, where maybe Grace Kennedy has made some inroads themselves, we're going to have to take the time and go and do research on these areas.
Yeah, makes great sense. I appreciate that. Really appreciate it, John. So we're about to move over into our top stock picks for the week. So Gary and John, prepare yourselves for that. Great. So first one comes from you, Gary. I'd love to have your top pick for this week.
My top pick is Mailpack. They just put out blockbuster results, but more importantly, it seems to me that the guys at Mailpack have cracked the code. This business used to be a very low margin business, and they found a way to use a software that has significantly expanded margins. And I think the third quarter showed that there's a lot more to come from the stock. Even though the PEs are relatively high at about 13 times, I think the pace of the profit growth is going to pull down that PE, and I believe that stock is going to continue to do well.
Excellent. Good one. I like it. And remember, a 13 times PE on the junior market is actually relatively low. The average, PE ratio for junior market's about 20 times. So that's a pretty good one. John, I think you know a thing or two about stocks.
Well, you should have asked me first, not Gary, because I was going to say Mailpack, and I feel very strongly about Mailpack because I have seen where Jamaican consumers, especially because of the shutdown and all of the problems associated with going out and shopping and so on, have now started to buy from home. And this happened in Trinidad a few years ago when, because of their financial, the foreign exchange restrictions, people started to use their credit cards to buy from home, buy items overseas, bring them into Trinidad, pay, and they were able to pay their credit card bills. The bank had to pay it. And so the purchase, the home purchase from overseas grew significantly in Trinidad. I think it's going to happen in Jamaica, and it's going to go beyond the COVID. And I think companies like Mailpack provide a great service to make it easy for somebody to shop at home and get their products delivered, hassle-free, no duty. They handle all the duty and the clearance and so on. So I think it's not just because of COVID, but it is a long-term good stock. I have a boring stock that I like, and nobody, it's really Carreras. I've always liked Carreras. They have a low PE, they have a good dividend yield, and they just are doing a tremendous job now of extracting more sales because of their new distribution system. And I don't think you can go wrong with Carreras.
Absolutely. It's hard to go wrong with Carreras. Again, a company that makes $3 billion a year in their sleep. They're not manufacturers, they just distribute. Great cash flow, PE ratio less than 10 times, dividend yield ratio of about 9%. I like Carreras as well, too. So Chris Berry isn't with us today, but he just WhatsApped me his pick. It's Grace Kennedy. So
can I tell you why?
Why Grace Kennedy is his top pick? Please do.
Well, if you remember, it was my pick last week. So, but one of the things about Grace that I think a lot of investors have always liked, but Grace has never been able to get ahead of it, is it has a significant cash pile. And when I listened to their CEO, Don Webby, speak today, I think for the first time in a long time, he might have gotten the green light to do some stuff with some of that cash. So they speak about some acquisitions to come, but more importantly, their third quarter has shown that finally some of their overseas expansions is starting to bear very good fruit. Obviously, they have benefited from the same effect we've been discussing about jam teas and COVID as a food manufacturer and distributor. They're doing very, very well. And if you notice, when you look on the stock, the price graph, there's not been a lot of volatility in terms of the price movement. Their PE is relatively low. I think you're going to see great things from this stock going forward.
I totally agree. I think Grace Kennedy is, I'm going to call him the sleeping giant, right? So again, 10 times PE ratio, company's growing from strength to strength. It's a great brand. They've been around for like 100 years, just about, generating a lot of cash. I really think they're the sleeping giant, and if Don Webby and those boys can get it right, I think they have a great opportunity, John, too, to do a carve out, But it's a great stock.
Well, remember, John is an old Grace boy, so he knows.
I went to university there.
He went to the University of GK.
All right, there you go.
Excellent. And my topic for this week is JMMB. Again, it's probably one of four companies, again, on the main market with a PE ratio down at 10 times. The business is growing, has great potential, great management team. We had Keith 2-3 weeks ago. It's a great company. So, folks, there are four great picks for you this week. You got them for free. But, of course, if you want further advice, you know where to find us. John, I really want to thank you for being with us. Gary, thanks for helping out. I'd like to thank all of our viewers out there for being a part of this month's virtual forum. We'd also like to thank our folks who joined us from social media. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube page. Thanks for watching on IG and all the other forms of social media. John, thanks again for providing that great insight in terms of jam teas and indirectly QWI. We're certainly looking forward to having yet another special guest and insightful discussion next week. Be sure to follow us on social media and watch out for who we're going to have next week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We wish you guys all the very best. And I'm going to let Gary close out with his favorite saying.
Sing.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, John. Thank you, everybody. All the best now. Take care.
So you have a way to go.
I have a